So I've already done a video before on my own personal budgeting method. I have 4 boxes that I put money into for budgeting, and those boxes are the necessity box, the self-investment box, the long-term box, and the it's okay to get rid of / debt box. 50 to 60% of your monthly or annual budget will go to the necessities box. The other 50 to 40% of it gets split up between the other 3 boxes. The other 3 boxes, what's in them is depending on where you are in life. And the long-term box also gets broken down into 3 types of terms. One is the short-term goals, mid-term goals, and then your long-term goals. Short-term goals being splurge money. Mid-term goals being, hey, I want to go on a vacation next year or start saving up for a down payment on a house or whatever. Long-term goals, retirement. The big thing that I want to go ahead and try to talk about today is people trying to skimp on their budgeting. There's a reason I do it the way that I do it, and it's because people try to cheat when they budget. They try to say, oh, here's all my bills from my bank account, but then they also are buying stuff with gift cards or cash, and they're not including that. People have stuff like food stamps. They don't include their food stamps in their budget, but in actuality, their food stamps are their food budget. Most of the time, most people on food stamps really struggle to pay for all their groceries with the food stamps, but often can't afford to do otherwise. Called SNAP now, but most people still just refer to it as food stamps. There's a lot of costs that people don't really think about that are annual costs or that are maybe only 3 times a year costs, and so they kind of forget about them or don't really think about them a lot. And so people try to skimp on budgeting by ignoring stuff like, hey, the tankless water heater has to be checked up on, or did we get air filters? It's been 6 months. Like, they don't pay attention to, oh yeah, we have to pay taxes on this every year. I remember that, but I forgot the HOA fees. There's so many things that come up over and over again. I cannot tell you the amount of people who don't think about oil changes. They just, unless it's actually happening, they don't think about it at all. Car registration each year. They think about their car insurance, but they don't think about, oh yeah, I have to pay some money for my car registration once a year. So they forget to throw it in when we're doing the budgeting. So that's the first way people skimp on budgeting. They forget to even add charges to the list of charges that they're paying. And so then they end up going over after a few months, and they're like, the budget obviously doesn't work. And I'm always saying, well, what charges have you had and which ones weren't included when we did the budget? And then, oh, lo and behold, I just paid almost $300 for car registration, and I'm $300 over my budget. Ta-da, there's the missing thing. So that's the first way people skimp on budgeting. But they also skimp on budgeting in another way that I see so much. I'm just someone who works with accounting, and so I want to help people, but I'm not an actual financial advisor. And so I feel like, you didn't hire me as a financial advisor anyway, so I'm just going to tell you how it is. People love to say, oh, the necessities box. Let's just automatically shove stuff into the necessities box. I cannot tell you the amount of people who say, here's my rent, here's how much I pay for food in a month, and they just stick it in there without paying attention at all. And immediately, my big thing is, no, that does not automatically go in the necessities box. So many people are living above their means because of the things that they shove in the necessities box. There are so many people who pay rent or a mortgage payment, totally just part of society, that the majority of people are going to be doing that. But a lot of them pay for way more of a place than what they should be. they can't actually afford the place that they're renting or that the mortgage is on. And some people can't help it. The cost of living in the area is atrocious. This is literally as much as they can handle, and there's not really cheaper options. So if you are a person who's already living in a place that's one of the cheaper places in your area, I'm not talking to you. But there are a lot of people who think, oh, well, I have to have this 2-bedroom apartment because I need a personal office. They don't actually need a personal office. They want a personal office. They could be renting for cheaper, but because they want to have an office, they are paying too much. And they are paying, a solid 80% of their income into just their necessities box because rent is too high. It's not the cheapest option in the area. It's not even the cheapest type of apartment that they could get. They could get a 1-bedroom apartment and they could have their desk in their bedroom and just have a decent sized bedroom. Or maybe the living room is decent sized and they could put the desk there. But because of their insistence on having an office, they can't actually afford themselves in a healthier form of budget. Some people say necessities can be 70-30 rule. All of your necessities fit into the 70% box. That can work, but it's not what I would prefer to suggest. I say 50% to 60% of your money is going to necessities because it's so much easier to stay out of debt, and it is tremendously easier to invest in your future when those are how your expenses are divvied out. If you can get less for your necessities than that, congratulations, that's awesome. But the majority of people, they really have to try just to get to that 50 to 60% mark. Rent or your mortgage, some people, they only include the mortgage itself and not the cost of upkeep for the building that the mortgage is on. They don't include, because they don't think about it, costs for, again, HOA fees or even just maintenance. And they don't think about, 3 years from now, I'm going to have to replace that stairwell and it's like really wobbly and stuff like that, but I'm not saving up now toward it. So it's going to be a massive financial blow then, or I could be setting money aside into a house maintenance amount, and then I'll have money to draw from. When I was growing up, one of the big giant things that came up for my parents was the washer machine just started spewing out black liquid. It was like this goo stuff, and we couldn't afford another washing machine, and yet we had this washing machine that was just really not okay until they finally got a cheap one. And in order to get that cheap one, they put it on a credit card, and it became this big chunk of debt for quite a while. And it was like a real genuine burden on our family. And yet, I mean, I'm one of very many kids. There had to be a washing machine to wash all of those clothes by hand for 6 kids. Well, at the time it was 5 kids living there. Like, that's way too much to ask. So we had to have the washing machine. We've gone before without a dryer because we just hang clothes on the line. We did hanging clothes on the line even into my adulthood, but we couldn't do the washing by hand very easily. Now, there's been points in our lives where we did washing by hand, but kids are dirty, kids are messy. It's a lot. And so we really needed the washing machine, but at the same time, it set my parents' backs for such a long time, even going for a cheapo washing machine, just a little junk one. Still, it took forever for them to pay that off. It's so important that if you actually have a place where you are expected to keep up the maintenance and the upkeep of the place, that you include that in your necessity budget, because it's gonna come up. A necessity is having a rainy day fund or a, backup account or, emergency fund. It gets called lots of things. I like to go with emergency fund because that's what it's for. It's for emergencies. But the point is, having that, in my opinion, is a necessity, and keeping that emergency fund stable is an important thing. If you take money out of the emergency fund, then you got to add to your necessity budget to repay your emergency fund. It's like giving your own self a loan, but since you gave yourself the loan, there's no interest on it. You just have to pay it back. Saves you a ton of money to not have to pay interest. Lots of people like to skimp on their budget for the emergency fund by saying, oh, well, I'm still in an emergency, but the thing that they paid for with the emergency fund is already paid for, it's already done with. It doesn't matter, you need to put the money back because another big emergency is going to happen. Right now you have little ittle-piddle problems, but big stuff happens in life, and you can mitigate the damage from the big stuff by having that emergency fund. People skimp on their budget for the necessity box in the budgeting. They say, oh, the whole food budget just goes in here because it's a necessity. I gotta eat. My kids gotta eat. It's not a necessity every single thing you're buying for food. People drink so much soda pop. It's mind-boggling to me the amount of money that people spend on soda pop. I always have to explain to them, that's not a real required part of your food budget. We can take off $40 a month here or $60 a month here or whatever it is, just getting rid of the soda pop. And they're like, but I need my sodas, you know, or I need my pop. I need, like, different people call it different things. The point is, they need it. They need their Coke, whatever it is. I say, you want it. And maybe it's a comfort item. If it is a comfort item, you can make part of the food budget for it, but it has to only be used as a comfort item. And some people say, oh, I have bad days every day, every single day. And I say, okay, if you have a bad thing happening every single day, you are stressed out every single day, you need to find a free way to mitigate that. And then in emergencies, pay for the soda pop. There are so many people who include in their necessity budget their alcohol or their cigarettes or their whatever vice it is, you know, their thing that, vice isn't the right word. Vice is for when you take it to an extreme. It's their comfort thing. For me, back in the day, I used to buy a thing of Oreos. And a thing of Oreos is less than $5. But, well, okay, it used to be. I've seen some Oreo things now that are like $7, but the point is, I used to get a thing of Oreos and some milk. But I realized I was relying on that way too often, and I was gaining weight, and also, because I was using it so often, it wasn't alleviating the stress in the way that it used to do. And so I had to realize that A, I couldn't afford this, and B, it wasn't as helpful as it should be because I was overusing it. And so I decided Oreos and milk, they have to be a only once in a great while when I am truly in crisis. The rest of the time, I need free or much cheaper options for mitigating emotional distress. And so I had to start getting into some hobbies. I got into video gaming where the games are either free or I buy it once and then I don't have to ever pay for it again. I got into book reading, things like that. Watching, you know, movies on streaming services where it's either free or super cheap because it's with commercials. I take walks and hiking. Hiking is such a good hobby because you buy yourself a good pair of shoes and then you go have at it and you explore the world, and nature is so calming. Nature is now my go-to. If I wake up and I'm stressed, I just look out at nature. I cannot live somewhere there's not nature at this point in my life. And you might say, well, that might create some financial things too, but at the moment I can afford that. So, you know, there could ever be a time in my life where I was in such a crisis that, you know, life happens. It does. Maybe I couldn't afford nature, but I would try to make that as temporary as possible because nature is my free go-to stress relief. And it means I don't need a lot of those other things that A, cost way too much money, and B, they don't help as much because you use them all the time. With the food budget, Saying, oh yeah, the food budget automatically goes into the necessities box is just lumping all food together as if it's all equally good for you. Saying, you know what, there's something to be said for me getting these foods that actually have nutritional value versus the candy and the junk food and the soda pop. Some people might say, oh, well, what about juice? And I'm not here to be a dietitian and tell you all the, ins and outs of how bad juice is for you in comparison to soda pop and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not a dietitian, okay? I'm not a nutritionist. I'm just saying certain foods are more necessary than others. And if you can look at that, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and you can tell me why that's a necessity, A, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are pretty cheap, and B, okay, cool, I understand, let's go with it. But it's a lot harder to convince me, oh yeah, I have to have that soda pop. And again, even if you say you really have to have it because it's an emotional thing, we're gonna decrease how often you have that soda pop, and we're going to make sure that when you're having it is only during an actual crisis. Now we're to the box for self-investment. They say, oh, well, I don't need to put any money in there. I'll just go to the library and read. That can be true. Absolutely, that can be true. But it's so interesting to me how necessary some things are to people that are not necessary for life at all, but they won't put any money into the self-investment box. Now, there are some people at certain stages in life where the self-investment box is going to be pretty full. For instance, if you're 20 years old and you're in college, the self-investment box might be like 40% of your entire budget because you're trying to pay for college and not end up with student loans. But maybe you're 50 years old, you're getting more toward the end of your career, you're starting to plan for retirement and stuff. The self-investment box might not have almost anything in it, and that's okay. But depending where you are in life, there should absolutely at least be something in the self-investment box. It is a little sad to me how many people are willing to put nothing in the self-investment box, but they'll put so much money into the splurge box. And they don't value themselves, they value material things. They'll put so much money into soda pop or into candy or into whatever it is, cakes, donuts, like there's baked goods is pretty high up there. You matter. The self-investment box is an important box because if you don't put anything in there at all, you can tend to forget that you are important. And if you are living your life, and it is your life, you should not be the bottom of the priority list. You should not be the last thing on the list of importance. It's very, very important to have something of some sort going into self-investment. It can be a gym membership, it could be, you go to this certain club or class or group, you take courses, you buy books for yourself, whatever it is. Maybe you're going to some sort of certification class or something to increase your skills, like learning a new skill, just trying new things. Whatever you need to put in there to make your life more fulfilling. It's such an important thing. Self-investment box gets skimped. People neglect it. The self-investment box gets neglected, and instead people shove whole chunks of things in the necessity box that aren't even necessities. The self-investment box is there for a reason. Now, the things to get rid of box and / debt box, people tend to be like, oh, well, I don't have to have this box forever, right? We say yes to everything, and this box is it's okay to say yes to, I quit that. Or I'm done with that, or I'm too mature to keep doing that, or I have grown, I'm a different person now, I don't need that. It's okay to let go of old things, it's okay to let go of things that you don't need anymore. And that box needs to stay there even if there's not something in it right this second, because you need to always give yourself that option to put something in there. It's a box for permission. For the short-term splurge money, I always say for the long-term box, that 50% of whatever your budget is for that box is probably going to go to your midterm goals. So then say 20 to 30% for the splurge money, and the other 20 to 30% of that budget for your long-term goals, aka investing into retirements and things like that. When people hear that, at first they're kind of like, some of them say, oh, shouldn't I put it all into investing for the future? And some of them say, oh, but I want more money than that for my monthly splurge money. And the mid-range goals are the ones that help you really stay motivated and get through life. Planning for that family vacation or planning for that down payment on the home that you want really are the goals that are like, wow, I dream about that, and what if 5 years from now I could have it? Those are such powerful motivators. So don't skimp on your mid-range goals, because yeah, sure, putting money toward investment for retirement is important, but it's not quite as motivating when you're 30 years old to be like, yeah, when I'm 70, I'm going to be living it up. Like, you need something between there to help you get to that. And spending non-stop with splurge money can just feed consumerism, and you end up with way too much material junk, and you're constantly just either hoarding or having to put stuff in that it's okay to get rid of box. Don't give yourself such a giant splurge budget that you're constantly buying junk. Think about things before you buy it. Don't just skimp on your budgeting with yourself and go for, yeah, I'm just gonna buy whatever. Because you're gonna not just risk putting yourself in debt, but you risk getting things that don't actually have any meaning to you. They don't actually have any worth or value. And when you buy them, they're just sort of there. And they just add clutter to your life. Get things that add value to your life. So please, when you are doing budgeting with someone, even if they don't do it my way, even if they do it in the 70-30 way, or they do it in, whatever way they choose, it doesn't really matter. Whatever kind of budget that you're doing, there's tons of free online forums for setting up budgets. Don't skimp when you're doing budgeting. Even if you're not doing it with someone else and you're just doing it with yourself, no one would know if you skimped, except you. Don't be a disappointment for yourself and lie to yourself or delude yourself or lead yourself on, because you matter. And making your finances actually fully apparent for yourself and being able to know exactly what you have to work with for yourself means not skimping out on life. It means financially, weird things aren't going to pop up and you're going to be like, oh crap, I'm over the budget this month. It means you're going to know exactly the resources you have to work with, and maybe even find out you had more than you thought you did once you take and wean down what you actually care about versus what you're wasting on. Like, being real and honest with yourself gives you opportunities, gives you a path for growth and getting to your goals. So don't skimp when you do your budgeting. Do yourself a favor and be real with yourself. Be honest with yourself about your finances.